What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Wire. I am Michael Oakes, solo dolo today, but we have an amazing guest with us. And before I introduce our guest, just hit that like button, subscribe, comment down below. We want to make sure that we're providing value to everybody that's watching, and thank you for being here. But without further ado, Casey Gregson, our guest today. How you doing, brother?
Man, doing good. How about you?
Oh, can't complain. Can't complain. I'm here talking to a absolute warrior in the industry, somebody who's out here making it happen, doing some really cool things. So we'll dive into that. But first, I know that you have a master's in petroleum engineering. Is that not, am I mistaken?
You got it. That's
All
right.
right. And you
Use
were
it
at
all the
Shell?
time.
You were at
Just kidding.
Shell for a while too, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. What sparked the interest, to make that transition from Shell to, getting into the real estate investing world?
Yeah, man. It really started before I actually started at Shell. I was at going to school at the University of Wyoming in 2010. I was actually going to grad school for petroleum engineering, and actually had an opportunity where it was funny. My roommate. It's funny how these things happen, right? So my roommate, we're just literally hanging out, college kids in the living room. My roommate's like, "Man, I'm going to graduate here next semester, and my dad's going to sell a house because in this college town, a lot of times it's kind of unique where the the dad, like a lot of times the parents will go buy if they got multiple kids and they're gonna go to the University of Wyoming, which is the only 4 year school. So a lot of families just go there, and a lot of times they'll just go buy a house for their kids, right? And they'll just their youngest from their oldest to their youngest, they all go and they all live in the house, right? So this was that situation where he was the youngest. They were going to sell the house. He's like, "Hey, Casey, why doesn't your dad go buy the house?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I hadn't thought about it. Let me ask him." So I went and talked to my dad, and he's like, "Well, Casey, I mean, he was always great at like just being open to anything." He's like, "Well, maybe why don't you buy it and I'll try to co-sign with you?" So we went down that path, and he co-signed. He actually helped used at that man. It was I bought it for like 150,000 at the time, and only put 10K down. That's all I needed to get a loan through on the secondary market. And my dad co-signed. And yeah, man, that was the first one. So I bought that one in 2010 and just kept it. And then I went and started working my W-2 job. But as I was working my W-2 job, I kept the rental because I eventually moved out. My brother moved in. He helped me manage it. And then my brother moved out and I kept managing it myself. So I'm like, hey, I get a 500 bucks a month cash flow, right? But I didn't really realize what I was doing until a lot of people, similar story. I was actually working in the field in oil and gas, driving like you had all this windshield time, we called it, right? Where you're driving between sites. And I was actually up in Alberta, Canada, and somebody recommended reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. So I started it. Never forget it, man. I was leaving Calgary, driving up toward like the Edmonton area. And I was like, I started it on Audible, turned it on, and man, I'll just never forget when the light bulb started to come on because I at the time I had that rental, but I hadn't really done much with it, and I didn't really think about what it was actually doing for me. So that light bulb came on. I'm like, oh wow, that's what I bought was an asset. And he's like, this is actually, and I started to understand assets and liability. Like I never really paid attention to it. I mean, I kind of generally knew it. But anyway, that book is so good about just fundamentally getting you to understand it. And then obviously I get farther into the book, and from that book I started reading like every other real estate book I could find, listen to Bigger Pockets, doing the podcast stuff. Like, because again, all that windshield time in the field. And then the cool part was when I was off, like I would have, so I would work in as a petroleum engineer. I went to the field they got to, like all of us engineers got to go learn the actual, how to be a
Right.
true engineer. You got to see it, right? So we
Right.
typically just go out there for a year. But when I got out there, I'm like, man, I'm not going back to the office. Like, this is way, like, I work half the year. My option is go back to the office, make about the same amount of money and be on call all the time and have to work weekends and not have half the year off. So I'm like, I'm going to ride this out. So I was
Yeah.
riding it out, spending all that time in the field, right, and learning. And then on my off days, that's when I started. And after reading that book, I'm like, I need to go buy a second one. So this is kind of as the story goes. I go to buy the second one, and all I did was just about 5 years after that first purchase. So we're talking around 2014, 2015. And I had done a little bit of work on the house, improved it, and the market had gone up. And what I did is I went to the bank again, and I'm like, hey, could I refinance this and get some money out and buy a second one? So literally, I pulled out 50K out of that first one, and then I went and bought another one. And this time, I did value add, right? I didn't just buy an existing one.
Yeah.
I bought something that needed work, and I took out a construction loan on the front end and then refinanced it on the back end. But man, the coolest part about this one, and when I explain these numbers to you guys, you're going to see why. Like I was hooked, right? So the house was rented for $730 a month, and this was right by the University of Wyoming. Like literally, from that house, I could throw a baseball and hit the campus. So that close, right? But it's rented for 730. I'm like, that's way too little, and it had the opportunity to finish the basement and add a kitchen to make 2 units. So took out the loan, used that 50K, invested in it, did the work, managed it. That's another funny story I'll share probably another time. Of like I was literally managing this as a GC from Texas, like out on a oil rig during the day, because like the work keeps going, right? Like I would start
Yeah.
this project on my off days and then it would keep going. So, but anyway, we got through to the end, and again, check out these numbers. So it was renting for 730 before I bought it. When I was all done with 2 units, I was getting 2650 a month, right? And like by the time I paid my mortgage and all my expenses, I was making like $1,000 cash flow a month. I was like,
Yes, sir.
yeah. I mean, so at that point, I'm like, holy cow, I just literally didn't have to come up with any money. I just used equity and a refinance to get it out of that property. And now I've got $1,000 a month coming in. And like at that point, like if the light bulb wasn't on after Rich Dad Poor Dad, now that I actually gone and applied it, I'm like, wow, how many more of these can I do?
That's incredible. That's such a cool story. I like the windshield time or however you said that. That's cool because we all do that, just driving around, whether you're going to an appointment or whether you're still at your W-2, you can just slap that on in the car and gain all this new knowledge, to add to the portfolio and to the tool belt to get you some extra money while, you might be doing your other job. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, man. It becomes addicting, right? Initially, like I would listen to sports talk and or maybe just music, but I'm like, all right, I got all this time. I could be doing something to better myself. And once you start doing it, then it's like now I miss it, man. I don't have as much driving time because I work from home. So I try to do it while I'm working out or if I'm just driving the kids around and they're going nuts in the back seat, I'll just turn it on. Or anytime I get to travel back to Wyoming. So I live in Houston and almost all of our assets are up in Wyoming. So anytime I get to make that drive, I love it because pick a couple books, do some Audible, yeah, and
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's kind of like a tattoo, right? You know how some people get that first one and then they're like, I gotta get more tattoos. So real estate is very similar to that, in my opinion, and I
Yep.
love it, man. So one thing I wanted to kind of add on to that, is there anything you took from your like engineering, like petroleum engineering background to real estate? Was there anything that kind of was a driving force for you there?
Yeah, man. So many things, right? Like, oh man, I want to go like cover three different things here, but I'll just
Give
focus
me
on
your
one.
top three. Yeah,
Yeah,
whatever you want
man.
to do,
I
man.
would say the first one is like process wise, right? Like learning how to write SOPs and think systematically and process wise, like how are we going to build out from construction to like the first one I did was property management, right? Like this all hit when COVID hit and everybody was like locked down and I was just managing like 5 to 10 properties at a time from Houston. But all my stuff was in either Dallas, Fort Worth, or up in Wyoming. So I was not doing it. And I'm like, and I also read another great book, 4 Hour Workweek, and they talk about leveraging VAs and virtual assistants. So I'm like, why can I not train a VA to do if I can do it from Houston and everything's up to Wyoming, why can't I train a VA to do that? And it blows a lot of people's mind when I tell them to this day I manage over 250 units with with virtual assistants in Mexico and the Philippines and Pakistan, right? But I took that approach of like, well, hey, why can't I do it? So, but where the shell part comes in and like working in corporate America in such a process driven company, I'm like, I literally just started writing everything out, recording Loom videos. Like I took it to the next level, right? Like a show we just had lots of plenty of SOPs, right? We just had to write it all out but it taught me how to be systematic and write things out. But then I took the technology to the next level and just built out the whole system and trained VAs and it didn't happen overnight for sure, man. It took a while, but now I love it because I've been able to grow and scale our company. And now I don't have to worry about third party property management and I get to keep it in house, which my investors love because we have way more control over it. I love because like I can, like, for example, if I want to go change something in the property management system or put yourself in the shoes of if you own rental properties and you have an issue or the rents aren't high enough or you got the repairs or whatever you want to fix, right? If you're going to a third party company, you got to go get their buy-in and you got to communicate with that person and get them to prioritize it, right? Versus me, I just get to be like, okay, I know my property management team meets every day at 10 o'clock. I just hop into that meeting and be like, hey, I'm noticing this, like we need to fix this, and I can impact and fix it right away. You
Yeah,
know?
it takes out the hoops you got to jump through. That
Yep.
makes it so much easier. And folks at home who are watching this, if you're not writing down what Casey is saying right now, you're doing something wrong. Okay, this is gold that he's giving you because SOPs are the driving force of any business. Doesn't matter if it's real estate, petroleum engineering. If you don't have systems and processes in place, you're not going to have a business. You have a hobby at that point, right? From what Casey always tells us. So
Yeah.
that is great. Any other things you want to add into that? Any other big
Yeah.
one?
I mean, even from like the way we like I'm trying to do even how we run like our estimates and project management, right? Like I working so long in the field, we were just literally managing drilling a well in the middle of West Texas, and we had estimates, projected estimates, and we tracked cost, and we did daily reporting. And now being able to apply that into my because we do construction in-house now, and so I've tried to adopt a lot of those systems to where having a budget and then tracking the budget, right? And even for like the meetings to where I remember being an engineer, we'd have a meeting with the engineer, the guy that was on boots on the ground, like we called him the company man. And then you'd have like your cost admin person, which to me, and we would all three collaborate, making sure things are on budget, right? So now I'm working on doing this internally in our company with my project manager or the engineer, or whatever, the foreman on the ground, and then a VA who's managing a lot of the expenses and making sure everything sort of adds up. And that's actually another step we're actually working on heading into this next year to be able to like have that much cost control. And because that's the other beauty of this business and why I built it is I always think that the hardest, most difficult, or the biggest risk in real estate is the construction piece, right? Like, yeah, markets go up and down, and fix and flipping is inherently risky, but I think the riskiest part is the construction. If there's just so many different ways you can get burned. But
Right.
also at the same time, if you can do it right, it can generate a lot of income. So
Yeah.
we've just brought that in house because I was tired of, and it's really also helped. It makes things more predictable as far as timelines and budgets because I'm not waiting on the GC who's got five other jobs, right? And this helps me in so many ways. For example, like when I go direct to seller and I'm negotiating and trying to make somebody an offer, I can be like, hey, I just have I have the confidence of knowing numbers, like I can estimate things really well. And then B, I also know that like I can actually get I know my guy's schedule within a couple weeks or months, or I could talk to my project manager and be like, hey, could we move on this house and flip it in 3 weeks? Because I do a lot of creative deals where I'll actually tell the seller, like, hey, rather than you taking here, you'll like this one, Michael. It's probably one of my favorite methods that we do here creatively that
I'm
not everybody
I'm
does.
writing this down myself
Yeah.
as you're going along right here. Trust
Yeah,
me.
man. So think about it. You got somebody and this is great for people who have a lot of equity, but the house needs a bunch of work, right? And not everybody wants to deal with contractors, especially in our market where there just aren't enough of them. So even if they were willing to deal with contractors, they're not out there, or you're waiting 3 months. So what I'll tell the seller is you can sell this house that needs a bunch of work at a big discount to an investor, right? And I can even give you a cash offer, right? And I'm happy to. But the alternative is I could get my crews out there. Why don't you wait 60 to 90 days to get paid? And I'm going to bring my guys out here, even if they're going to, we might we've literally done deals like this where we spent over 100,000, right? One we spent like 180K to fix this house up, right? But by the time we fixed it up, now this house you could sell on the retail market for top dollar, right? And so now we make our profit as a fix and flipper. The seller makes way more money because if they would have sold it as is, they're taking a big discount, right? Because
Right.
it's a big risk for a fix and flipper. So we do that all the time, and it helps us because a lot of times, well, if they have it free and clear, easy, right? But even if they don't have a loan, we'll just take it over sub two, and then we'll pay them on the back end, and we outline that profit share like from the start, and everybody knows what's going on, and everything's like full disclosure of like how much it's going to cost and what we're trying to make it for,